We are now pleased to be joined by Virginia men's lacrosse head coach Lars Tiffany. Coach, it's actually the fourth time you've been on the Ostrom Avenue podcast over the years, talking before a Virginia Syracuse game.
I always enjoy joining you, Jordan, and being a part of this. It's I try to make it about the men because they have a short 4-year window of playing college athletics and being the stars. But yeah, this one's personal, right? This one just feels so much better. I grew up in the shadows of the Dome in Lafayette, New York, growing up with the Onondaga players, adoring everything Syracuse Orange. Going to Manley Fieldhouse, watching Jim Boeheim as a young man coach that team 50 years ago. So yeah, so it's really special to connect with Syracuse people, Syracuse fans. Obviously, the orange is a little different color or almost the same.
Color
But
code's a little bit different.
it was a little different, but man, it's just I can't deny my former 7 to 22-year-old self, right? Who just
Yeah.
it was all Syracuse, is all about the Orangemen.
Yeah, we'll get more into that a little bit in a little bit, but going on Virginia's season as a whole, you guys have had a lot of success this year in particular. Only 2 losses to Johns Hopkins and to Duke just last week. How's the season been so far in 2024?
Yeah, it's if you talked to me in the preseason, I would have said, all right, we're really a lot of question marks here, starting with the faceoff X. And so if I answer your question from the faceoff perspective, how's the first 12 games of 2024 gone? We're thrilled. We brought in 3 transfers, which, just for the faceoff X. And we usually bring in about 2 or 3 transfers total. So for us to bring in 3 was shocking, uncharacteristic. Thank goodness we did it, because Gable Braun's been hurt the whole year. He played a little bit against Hopkins 1 game and he got re-injured. And so we've used all 3, and Thomas Colucci, who's played right down the street at Colgate, Anthony Gabriel at Navy, and then another guy right down the street, actually, Matt D'Souza, was at Binghamton, the 3 of them. And so instead of just throwing out the same guy like we did for the last 3 years with Petey LaSala, and it was a known and we didn't have to think and analyze, Kip Turner and Kevin Cassis have done an incredible job mixing and matching and looking at our 3 individual strengths versus the stud that we're going to go against. It seemed like every week, right? The ACC is loaded with fantastic faceoff men, and now we're going against not only Cohn but Mullen as well for Syracuse. And so we are going to the bullpen, bringing in a knuckleballer, bringing in a fastball, bringing in a curveballer, like we haven't had to do that with Petey LaSala. So I'm really happy with what we've been able to do. And now at wing play, Ben Ware has been amazing. Ben wasn't with the program last year. He had to step away for some personal reasons. He has created an All-American type year. It doesn't have the hype because he didn't play last year. And then before that, he was kind of behind Jared Connors. He is establishing himself. So he's coming in and picking up a ton of ground balls along with our short stick. So I'm thrilled there. Goalie play has been great until Duke. Matt Nunes has been fabulous. The quarterback of our defense, running the clear to almost perfection, runs our 10-man. He runs our pressure ride really well, knows when to call it off the dogs and get in a hole. And then just had a really bad day, unfortunately, down in Durham. But he's been great outside of this past weekend. Defense is getting better slowly. Slow start. Didn't really like to start, but we have made some significant progress there. Offense is still tinkering, trying to find our way there. But overall, you got to be thrilled to be 10-2. But there still seems like there's a lot more area for improvement. And that's what this whole thing's about, right? The race to improve.
Yeah, trying to peak at the right time is what they always talk about here at Syracuse, especially for the women's team. You look at them last year going undefeated and then not being able to sustain that into postseason, which is what really matters. You mentioned the goalie Matthew Nunes. Obviously he's been a great goalie for you guys the last couple of years. He scored a goal going coast to coast earlier this year. Do you think the game against Duke was just, a bad outing that, is going to happen, and you assume that he's going to be back in net for the game against Syracuse?
I do assume he'll be back to full strength. He was dealing with something last week, a minor injury, not a major one, and and he was dealing with some really good shooters too. Let's give Duke credit. I mean, some of those shots in the first quarter, they were painting the off stick side pipe, and they just brought some really great heat. But yeah, he was dealing with something. Knowing what he's done 95% of his career, we have a lot of confidence in him. Now, having said that, we also understand the dome, I'm sorry, um, is much more difficult to play in for goalies than maybe any other venue in the country. The sight lines, the atmosphere, the energy, the shooting from the Syracuse sharpshooters, it's a difficult place to rebound. You almost want, like, could there be an in-between game to get your confidence and a recovery back, right? Hey,
Yeah.
we're going to recover in the dome against Syracuse sharpshooters. All right, here we go. So, and so that'll be the challenge.
Yeah, and then you guys go to Notre Dame the following week, so a couple quite interesting games coming up. You mentioned the Petey Lasala, and obviously that's a big storyline because of how dominant he is. And Syracuse has kind of done a similar thing, not to where they're throwing out three different guys, but they've had to completely revamp their face-off unit from a year ago. How was that adjustment kind of gone since the start of the season? Like, did you guys envision using three kind of in the preseason, or has that kind of been an adjustment throughout the year based on the games?
I think we all knew we'd be rotating more men in, but I wasn't sure what it would look like. I mean, Gable Braun, who is one of our men who's been with us for 3 years, waiting in the wings for Petey Lasala to move on to the PLL. He was the number one guy coming out of the fall, and it was all going to be him, with maybe supplementing with seeing who would develop to be the second best guy. That obviously didn't happen due to his re-injury of a shoulder, and so now it's like, okay, we got to look at these three guys, and I can tell you the scrimmages didn't go great. And that first game, we're going against Justin Wheatfeld from Michigan, a guy who not only can win faceoffs at 60, 65%, but can score goals and play offense. We had all sorts of gimmicks and things set up and ready. And then Anthony Gabriel goes out there, and Thomas Colucci goes out there, and they won. I think we won 60%. We were like, I shouldn't say stunned, but we were surprised, and it was a wonderful surprise. And our wings were doing a great job. Joey Terenzi was really impactful early in the season, along with Noah Chismar, and then Ben Ware we've talked about. So it's been like this, a little bit of a found gold. Like, wow, we have more with these guys than we expected. And maybe Syracuse feels the same, because Mason Cone is playing fantastic lacrosse. And what he did at Tufts, he's continuing to do at the Division I level. And then obviously the new guy, Mullen, and what he's given him. So, yeah, we all look a lot different at the faceoff X, don't we? And we've both been pretty successful. So our challenge will be, I wasn't sure we could sustain the success we've had there once we got into ACC play. And we've just about 50-50 against Wambach at UNC. And then versus Duke, we had a better day. Now, granted, Naso was banged up, and so Duke had to bring in two other men to take faceoffs for them, Girardi and Engelke. But we were, at the end of the day, we did win over 50% of the faceoff. So can we do it again here at Syracuse against two faceoff men who are in that 60% range? It's I give a ton of credit to Colucci, Gabriel, D'Souza, and then Kippen and Kevin, the two assistant coaches who've, again, we're putting a lot more thought into it than we ever have before.
Yeah, it's definitely been a fascinating year on the Syracuse side because you mentioned it. You didn't know necessarily how much it would translate for Mason Cone coming from D3 to D1, and then Mullen being a freshman. It's always a somewhat of an adjustment period to then, and then you get to ACC play, and they didn't do well against Duke, and then you come to find out that Cone wasn't full strength against Notre Dame. So it's like, you're looking at it. But one of the goals of winning faceoffs is to, obviously get the offense more possession, something Syracuse struggled with last year. And Virginia has another, top tier offense with Connor Schellenberger back, Peyton Cormier. You mentioned, the transfers you guys bring in only 2 to 3. You lost Thomas McConvey last year. From last year, you lost Xander Dixon, but you add McCabe Millen. What are the kind of the differences you think from last year's offense and the way that they operated to this year's offense?
Sure. Xander Dixon was a man in our program who was played in a role, was played sparingly early on, was at midfield. And then at the beginning of the 2023 season, the scrimmages didn't go well with the offense. We said, let's try him on attack. And then he proceeds to score, what, 62 goals? Like, how dumb are we as coaches? Like, we should have seen that a lot sooner. Now, I know it's when you're at Syracuse or Virginia, there's a lot of talent ahead of you when you're a freshman, so you got to try to work your way up the ladder there. I know a couple guys, Spalina, certainly he just emerged. Some guys are so great, they don't have to wait. But, Xander was in that role. So we probably miss Xander the most, what he could do scoring wise. I know last year when he played Syracuse, Xander not only scored, but finishing Schellenberger feeds, but he was able to post up and dodge a couple times and score. And so last year we were really a one quarterback system, though. It was really Schellenberger with Cormier and Xander finishing inside, working together. This year it's really a two quarterback with McKay Millen as a first year getting a lot of time and playing also that distributor, probing, looking and seeing what he's got, with Peyton being the only inside finisher. So that part is different. Obviously, new coordinator, Sean Kerwin, left to become the head coach at Dartmouth, and Kevin Cassis left his head job at Lehigh to join us, which we're very fortunate to have. Some of the things he saw were really good schemes he kept, and then he's got some other things, gives the guys a little bit more options than Sean did. And so we're a little less predictable. But with different personnel out there. And we are lucky to have our own tough transfer, like Mason Cohen is at Syracuse. We're lucky to have Jack Boyden, his creativity. You can't define the Syracuse offense without saying creative and unique. Jack Boyden is our version of that. He's got very, very similar sort of stylistic flair to his game.
Somebody that seems to be over reliable at this point, Connor Schellenberger. He's the top recruit back in 2019. What does he bring to the roster at this point? Obviously, he brings the talent, but also the leadership aspect of it. I was reading an article where he took less NIL money and got
Yeah.
all of his players and teammates quarter zips or whatever it was. What does he bring, also off the field that really helps his team?
Yeah. He's not the big voice. He's not the big vocal rah-rah leader. That's not him. When he does talk, it's like we all lean in, like, oh, he's actually going to say something, because it's so valuable when he does talk. But so he wants to be the guy who enters a room a little sheepishly, not like the slick Willie, hey, yo, Joey, hey, how you doing? He wants to come in, they have a low profile off the field, but on the field, big, big profile. He really is just about the most unselfish person I've ever seen. He took less scholarship money to come back for a fifth year. As the scholarships, they're pretty much 4-year deals when you sign with a program. The fifth year, there's no protection, there's no guarantee, and of course, if Connor Schellenberger says he needs a full ride, we're giving him a full ride to come back for a fifth year. And he took less. He's like, if it helps the team, I'm like, yeah, it absolutely helps the team, but I want to make sure you're good. He's like, I'm good. And he's done so much for the rest of us, and he's an amazing player and an incredible human being.
Another great story that I was reading up on the Virginia's side of things is Noah Chismar and the tremendous story that he's gone through. What is that how do those stories kind of impact your team on a day-to-day basis? You mentioned the Schellenberger taking less money to be with the team as well.
It's so important. Everyone talks about team culture, probably the most overused word, but it's such an important word. Can you have a culture where the young guys come in and learn from the older dogs? And if the older dogs that have sacrificed, like we have here, putting away big social circles and minimizing the social circles and doing the right things, and the young guys look up to the older guys and inherit that work ethic and the sacrifice off the field. When you've got Noah Chismar and Connor Schellenberger, those are prime examples for our young guys to follow. And if somebody's thinking about going off the rails and doing something stupid or complain about, this or that, how can you when you got Connor and Noah and old Kastner as they're not, and they're a better lacrosse player than you, and they're outworking you. Guy could be like, hey, how come I'm not playing at the end of practice? Look over your shoulder. What do you see? Oh, wow, Schellenberger's doing extra shooting. Oh, Kastner's taking extra one-on-ones with a backup attackman. Oh, get out of here.
What can you say about Chismar's journey? Just how, what he's had to deal with and where he's at right now.
Noah, I know I'm giving a lot of accolades here, but I don't know if I've ever met someone tougher. I mean, he's dealing with some injuries right now, and he's like, I'm playing. I mean, he's like, you see him go down in the Duke game. It's like, oh God, you're hoping it's, a finger or something to the male private zone that he'll be fine in 10 minutes. No, he did something more significant. Oh, but he's going to keep playing. What? How? I don't know. He says he's playing. He just won't stop. And he didn't play against, I think it was Hopkins. We had to give him a day off there. And he's played hurt since, and he's gotten better, but then he keeps getting, I mean, we didn't want the guy. He was committed to Marquette. He had signed in NLI. And I get these phone calls. People are like, oh, he's really interested in Virginia. Look, he signed a contract. I have zero interest. I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking about Noah. I'm not infringing. This is a violation of NCAA, NLI rules. I kept getting phone calls, and I finally get a phone call. He just asked to have his NLI ripped up by Marquette. I'm like, really? Okay. Well, it doesn't guarantee anything. I'm still like, well, he got in on his own, and he shows up, and about 2 days into practice, it's like, I'm really glad he's here. He's just, one of those 40 times it's not going to blow you away. The bench press isn't going to blow you away. The height and weight isn't. And then you put him on a lacrosse field, and, and I actually talk about Syracuse guys like this. The Syracuse guys understand the game of lacrosse. There's a savviness, a slickness to when to go over the midline and when not to, and how to chase a ground ball and how to goose it to a teammate versus getting. Noah's got all. He just feels this game, and but he's also has this huge heart. Again, I don't know if I ever. I mean, he is Rudy.
That's an awesome comparison right there. Something that, everyone's competing to get to eventually is the NCAA tournament. But this season, the ACC brought back the ACC tournament. So there's that little gap in
Yeah.
between. We talked to John Danowski earlier in the month about it. What are your opinions on the ACC tournament, being back for the first time in a couple of years?
Well, if you ask the men, they're thrilled. If you ask the country, television viewing country, they're thrilled. Yes, the coaches, we're kind of like, okay. It's it's a lot right before the NCAA tournament. Now it could help a team get in. There's definitely years, and it could be us. Maybe we're going to be 2 weeks from now going, thank goodness we have the ACC tournament, because it gives us another chance to play a quality opponent and try to earn a big win. And so we see it from both sides as coaches. I actually sort of didn't mind the last 3 years where we had 6 ACC regular season games, and that meant you had an extra home ACC game that you could do a big event around, pop in circumstance, alumni weekend, parents weekend, whatever weekend you want to make of it. Now we're going to play these games in Charlotte, in a great venue, in a great city. The history, though, of attendance for these are not great, and so we look at both sides as a coaches. But yeah, the players, they want a tournament, you know, win or go home. The fans, the viewing fans of TV, they want this, and so it's I guess we're like the mailman. We're delivering.
You mentioned the big games, the home games, the spectacles. This weekend, Syracuse retiring Paul Gait's number. The football spring game is afterwards. But just focusing in on Paul Gait, did you ever get a chance to play against Paul Gait at all?
I never played in college in a gate-free world. I was tortured all 4 years. So we both Paul and Gary and myself are the same year. So it's funny. I remember watching film years after the fact of 1987 when we were both freshmen, and Syracuse came to play us at Brown, and one was number 38 and one was number 39. I can't remember which was which, but I'm watching myself as an LSM flying out and harassing one of them by the sideline. And I'm like, what am I doing? But at that point, we didn't know the aura, the legend hadn't arrived yet. And whoever it was ran by me. Luckily, he didn't score, but he did blow by me. And then, like, the next 3 years, I'm probably like 10 yards off, like broken down. And so it was, yeah. So I was fortunate to play against them, and be able to witness firsthand how amazing the two of them were as players, and certainly got to see it on the national stage, the international stages with Canada, and I still don't know. There'll never be a better duo on the same midfield line, and individually, you could certainly make an argument best ever. You know, the size, the speed, the hands, the skill. They brought a skill set that you just didn't see at that point. With a different, you know, when now sticks are easier to do some more sophisticated things with, they were doing it with old technology, and again, the size and speed and creativity. Wow. Wow.
You
So
mentioned the
yeah, so I've
highlight
been
reel
there.
plays. We still have the air gate call in some of the
Oh,
stuff that
cool.
we use nowadays, which is awesome. Because when you go back and watch the replay, it's just, I mean, how did he do that?
I
And
know. But I want to interject. Their last home game. Um, their senior year was my senior year. It was in the carrier. It was a Carrier Dome in the quarterfinals of the NCAA tournament. So I played my last college game was playing in their last game in the Dome in 1990, and I remember we were down 2-0 about 30 seconds into the game. If you pull up that tape, and each had a goal. Dom Starja, the Brown coach at the time, calls timeout. We couldn't hear him in the huddle for about 45 seconds. The place was going berserko. It was so loud. It was so loud. Even in our defensive huddle, it was hard to hear Dom. And it wasn't the start we were hoping for.
I can only imagine. On the Gate brothers, from your perspective, what do they mean as kind of a duo to lacrosse, both on and then off the field with the Gate Lacrosse company that they've formed over the years?
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? They've made lacrosse their lives. Um, and I greatly appreciate that because I've done the same. But they've done to a greater extent, right? With the business platform of trying to create better sticks, better equipment. And so that ingenuity, that engineering creativity is really cool to see that they're doing, you know, what they were creative on the field, they're doing it as well off the field. And so it's a you know, give them a ton of credit that they capitalized on their name and their play, and but really their intelligence and what they could do with that. So that's yeah, not many of us have been able to figure that out, but they've done it, and they've done it at a high level. So that's really cool.
One more Central New York specific question. I dug deep. I found that in 1994, you started your coaching career at Lemoyne.
Yes.
Um, what does it look like? What does it feel like now that Lemoyne is D1 lacrosse? And have you followed their season at all, the first season?
I have followed their season, and I'm sure there's some moments Dan Sheehan and the Dolphins are like, man, maybe we should have stayed at D2. We were like fighting for national championships, and now you know, now we're just fighting. It's tough. It's a tough transition to make, and I don't think they were given a lot of heads up and warning.
Do you have a
You
favorite
want a big
memory
runway
from
on
your
that
Lemoyne
because
days?
what's that?
Do you have a favorite memory from your Lemoyne days?
Oh yeah, gosh. I was very fortunate to coach with a man named Shane Lynch, who was younger than me, Liverpool product. And I was actually coaching the women's lacrosse team my first year. My first college gig was women's lacrosse, D2 Lemoyne College with my girlfriend Denise, and we had a blast. It was so fun. It was a second year varsity program. That next summer, Rob Didio was let go, and there was a coaching search. And I was actually part of the search. And it was not an inside job because when we hired Shane, I asked him to join him, and he said no. But then fortunately, 3 or 4 other people told him no, so he had to come back to me. and he had to hire me. So that was my first men's coaching job was Shane Lynch, who was a great guy, great guy. Unfortunately, Shane died of cancer a couple years later. But he was a young coach. He was an up and coming tough love guy. But yeah, spending some time with him. But I can yeah, I remember like one of we were playing Ithaca, and it was overtime, and I moved the faceoff wing to be more aggressive. And just before the whistle, Shane's like, "No, no, they're gonna pop it forward for fast break. No." And sure enough, they popped it forward for fast break. Thank the Lords. Our goalie made the save, threw the ball the other direction. We went and scored a fast break goal because I had totally messed with this faceoff.
That's an awesome story.
Oh
That's
my God.
Coaching career and the balance right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, looking at the game this Saturday for one final question, what are the keys for Virginia to go into? You know, we can call it the Carrier Dome because nobody doesn't call it the Carrier Dome. But what is it? The keys to victory for Virginia going into the Dome on Saturday to come out with a win?
Yeah. It always starts at the face-off, and it's a broken record for coaches, right? Because it's all about possession time. Um, but certainly there, like again, we've been able to neutralize the first two opponents at the face-off X and ACC play. Can we do it again against what we think is maybe the best wings in the game? These are the face-off wings for Syracuse with Sam Alexo and Matt Wright with the poles, and then certainly 14 and 15 Stevens and English, and what they're really good coming in and swooping up and picking up ground balls. Um, and so can we get those possessions? Because we know how deadly that Syracuse offense is. Can we reduce those number of touches by a couple each half compared to what they normally do? That'll be a big part of this. It's Syracuse when they can generate transition, when there's an odd man rush, I don't think there's a better feeding passing team in the country. Their 6v5, 5v4s are just magical. We've got to reduce or eliminate those. There's some opponents we play like, hey, you know what? Face-off guy for Virginia, you're trapped. Just run out. Whatever. They're not going to take advantage of a 6v5 in 5 seconds. Oof, not this team. And so can we survive 6v6? Maybe with offensive middies in the game. Because the way Stevens and English play two ways, they can trap your offensive middie and then just dodge them and go at them and play. So that'll be a key for us defensively. And then offensively, holy cow, is a much better team defense than they've been in the last few years, right? I mean, holding Duke to 4, and holding a lot of other good opponents to lower than their normal. It's really impressive what the defense is doing. So can we crack the code on it? That'll, can we generate slides? Can we generate rotations and then avoid their great stick work with knocking down passes?
Awesome. Well, we wish you good luck on Saturday, and thanks again for joining us, Coach.
Yeah, it's fun. It's always fun to join you, Jordan. And it's always exciting to be right in the thick of this incredible rivalry, right? Syracuse for Virginia. It's just about as good as it gets in college lacrosse.